an email that everything I have in
Oh, the emails about the GSPs that they were approved.
Oh yeah, that they were approved. Yeah, that's good news. That's on you. I'm so worried about this. This is the worst meeting I've ever had. Just so you know, 18 years. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First off, a little bookkeeping, if we could. If you would like to speak, it's your right to speak. We're going to limit it 3 minutes so everybody gets a chance. Please fill out a card. Makes it go so much faster. And then, look, I run a pretty tight ship, and I don't want you clapping, cheering, jeering, threatening to hang me or anything, okay? Let's just keep it dignified, treat each other with dignity, and understand that there will be opposing views here. We're all Americans here. There's nobody up here that wants to be doing what we're doing today, just to let you know. We've had long discussions. There was nobody in the audience until the fee came out. So I just want to give you a little background. Please, as Americans, let's salute our flag. Under God. Yep, in case somebody left it out. Okay, please call the roll.
Board Member Connolly,
Here.
Board Member Goodson,
here.
Board Member Bynum,
Here.
Board Member Daly, Board Member Riston.
Here. Okay, next up is a consent agenda. Would anyone from the audience like to pull something from the consent agenda? Would any board member like to pull something from the consent agenda? I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda, please.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? The consent agenda is, ma'am, I think you're misunderstanding what a consent agenda is. It's generally everyday actions that we take, and it's, go ahead, you want to explain the consent agenda?
Actually, there's page 2 of the agenda is missing, so it does look like there's no opportunity to speak. So let me get you a different one.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I'll just review on the consent agenda today. What we have is the minutes from the May 25th regular meeting of this board. And then we also have a contract renewal with our legal counsel, BKS, because I cannot pronounce their long name. And so that is what is on the consent agenda. So it is not related to the hearing today or any of the actions for adopting the fee. It's just regular business of the board. And typically, when we have something on the consent agenda, staff does not need to report out on it. But if there is some item on there that people do want to comment on, it can be pulled and we can respond to that.
So I'm sorry that I didn't know, because I do this all the time. I didn't know that you didn't understand what a consent agenda was. But if you do want to pull an item on the consent agenda, we'll start over. Okay, it's posted online prior to the meeting, and that's probably your best source of information is online. Everything's okay. You can get on a mailing list, ma'am. All right, and this is deteriorating. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. All right, now we're going to move on to the public hearing. We're going to conduct a public hearing on the Wyandotte Creek GSA property-related fee. This is a time and place for the public hearing on the Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainability Agency proposal to adopt a fee to fund the agency's compliance with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. This public hearing is being held under the applicable provisions of Proposition 218 and the California Government Code. The public hearing is now officially open. We'll have a presentation on the Sigma fees by the agency's consultant. After that, we will receive comments from all interested persons. When all comments have been received, the public hearing will be closed. The agency's consultant will then tabulate all written protests received and report the final count. If the protest fails, the board will deliberate on the fee proposal. Okay. Does everybody understand if it fails, then we'll deliberate on a proposal. If you guys kill it, then the state's going to take over. That's all I'm going to say about that. I now would like to call on the agency's consultant to provide his presentation. I told you there'd be people in this room sooner or later.
Chair Connolly, may I
Yes.
just interject real quick before Jacques gets started?
Oh,
So I
please do.
wanted to review the entire process,
I'm
just so
sorry, you're
everyone
right.
is clear, because it can be a little confusing, and we might be here a while, and I want to make sure you all stay through the really good stuff. So we will start, and this is on page 2 of the agenda. It says public hearing, and Chair Connolly just opened up the public hearing. You'll also see under that items of regular business, those items 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all dependent on item 3, the public hearing. So with the public hearing now being open, we'll have a presentation by the consultant, and then we'll have an opportunity to open it up to board questions and then open it up to the public to make comments on the presentation and the fee. Once everyone has made comments that are going to speak, then we will close the public hearing and we will adjourn the meeting temporarily to be able to count protest ballots. They're all in the other room. You're welcome to watch that counting. Everything is still sealed, and at that time, the consultant will be opening the ballots, counting them, and depending on how many we get, it can take a little while. We didn't pre-open the ballots and pre-count everything, so everything is still closed and sealed. So that does take a little bit of time. So last night, the Wyandotte GSA went through this process, and a lot of people left after they provided their comments, and you're welcome to do so. But what I will point out is on the regular agenda, after assuming that we don't have a majority protest, these other items will be reviewed. And one among them is the proposed budget. At that time, the board will look at the budget, and they'll approve a budget for this next fiscal year. And depending on the budget they approve, and when I say depending on, there's 2 that are proposed. One is the proposed budget that was in the fee report that had no Sigma grants, completely what this fee is based on. And then there's also a budget assuming that we do apply Sigma grants. And that determines they can pass the maximum fee, but for the fiscal year, they can also do a lesser fee. And so depending on what they decide to do with the budget at that time, the fee can be the maximum of fee approved, but what goes on the assessor's roll for this next year could be a lesser amount. And you might want to stay around for that. Otherwise, we'll just post the information after the meeting. So depending on how long you want to hang out with us today, I recommend that you stay for the full time. We will also, item 8, be considering kind of the appeal process policy, a framework for that we'll be developing over the next few months, assuming the fee passes, that addresses some of the concerns that many of you brought up during the workshop of, what if I think I'm being charged the wrong fee? How do I dispute that? How can I check it? All of those things. So we're talking about the framework a little bit about that today, and then over the next few months prior to the tax bills going out, we'll finalize that policy. So those are. So it's a pretty comprehensive meeting, and everything is interconnected. So just so you know that's what today looks like. Okay. Yes. So so when we talk about ballots, what we're talking about is a protest ballot. So if you, we have some here. If you do want to turn yours in, just put your name. If you don't have your APN number, just write your address. We can look it up. The numbers that we have so far, we're probably just going to count all of them and say that that's the total. As you know, we need a significant number of protest ballots to stop this. But I do think it's important that if you are against the fee, do submit a protest form for your parcel so we get an idea of what people are thinking, and that helps it to inform the board. So make sure. Yes. So if you mailed them in, they're in the other room. If you have filled them out here, and you can fill them out up until the time just before we go into the other room to count them. Okay?
Could I have mine now?
No. All right. So with that, Jacques Debray from Ludorf and Scalmanini will be giving a presentation. He'll be reviewing the road of how we got here and talk about the fee, and then we'll just take it from there. Thank you, Jacques.
Okay,
It turns off there.
gotcha. Good afternoon. I'm Jacques Debray with Ludorf and Scalmanini. Eddie Teasdale is here, as well as one of our staff engineers helping with the protest count. So we're glad to be here. You have a lot of items in front of you, and so we're going to keep our upfront review short, but I think it provides context for those providing comments on the process. So as Cammie outlined, we have a series of items, and so for the public, are you going to get to the presentation? Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So we just like people to know that GSAs throughout California are grappling with this very issue, both groundwater sustainability and financial sustainability. And so we just took a review of what's happening in the state. There's about 350 GSAs and about 150 subbasins grappling with the same issues that we are here. So it's not an easy task, but the key is working together in the subbasin and keeping things local. There's also groundwater sustainability plans under review by DWR, and Cammie got some good news today that both the plans were approved, so that's great news. It means we can spend our money on management, not further planning. So I think that's real positive. So we just want people to know that this is a large-scale effort all over the state. Wyandotte Creek is fortunate. It's a medium priority basin, which means we have to be diligent, but we don't really have like a direct overdraft to deal with, but we have to continue to manage the resources well so that we keep a balance over time. So I think that's the focus through the initial 20-year compliance period with the signal regulations through 2042. And Wyandotte Creek is a fairly small subbasin. It's about 60,000 acres. The road to sustainability, it started with adopting the groundwater sustainability plan, and now that you have approval, we're into the plan implementation period. So during these first 5 years, it's really focusing on starting to implement the groundwater sustainability plan priorities and proactive actions, and also making sure that we can keep a local agency locally funded for local benefits. This is just an overview of the steps we've gone through working with the GSA, the board, stakeholders. We spent a lot of time in the first few months of the project, January, February 23 timeframe, really looking at the most cost-effective business model, and that's reflected in the revenue projections that the board approved. We really kind of approved the fundamental revenue projections at the March board meeting, and then we developed a fee option analysis in a technical memorandum, which led to the selection of the preferred fee. There was a special meeting in May, which was a very good meeting, so the board could focus in on what's the best fee alternative, at least for the startup long-term fee aspect, that's more equitable. That was reflected in the engineer's report approved at the regular May meeting. And then we sent out the Prop 218 notice first week in June. That was included in the engineer's report, followed up by an informational workshop, which was here June 22nd. And we're now here at the public hearing on the 27th of July. And if there's action taken on a fee, there'll be tax roll information submitted to the county by August 10th. These are the state intervention fees. These are regulatory fees, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. If a groundwater sustainability agency decides to be non-compliant, if you will, then they're going to be subject to these fees. But there's other costs if you let the state intervene, because you're going to pay for their time to be involved. So we just put this up for information. This GSA is being proactive in keeping things local. Next slide, please. The GSA board has also been proactive with financing and funding and how to keep costs down. And so they submitted a funding application at the end of last year, and it looks like some awards are pending, and we'll be talking about that with respect to the budget. But I did include the actual DWR draft funding list for your sub-basin. So you can see the star is next to the GSP implementation action, which will help you defray some of your costs. Next slide, please. So all the GSAs dealing with this long-term funding challenge are operating under provisions of SGMA that give GSAs the authority to plan for and manage groundwater and implement plans and to set fees to be sustainable, both from a groundwater perspective and financial perspective. So we're just operating under the authorities that exist. The Wyandotte Creek GSA has been proactive with the schedule. We've stayed right on the schedule, no surprises. And so that's been a good idea so that people that want to be involved can follow along and know exactly where we are and what we're working on. But we did extensive outreach, which started early in the process, and we added a whole section to the website so it was easy for folks to follow along and understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. We delivered the fee options TM at the April meeting, like we said, which led to the selection of a preferred alternative that was included in the fee report approved at the May meeting. And we're here tonight, as we've been saying from the beginning, right on schedule, that we'll be considering a long-term fee. This just shows the diligence of opportunities for everyone to participate, but we've had everything run through the board. They've provided the guidance and helped us get here tonight, and so we're at this important meeting, and a lot of thought has been put into this. Here's just an overview of some of the outreach we've done along the way. We developed a fact sheet which explained the need for long-term funding. We've had a few versions of frequently asked questions so that people interested in having their concerns addressed, could refer to that and see that we are trying to address questions as they arose. The board meetings were a central focus for sharing information and a public opportunity for involvement. There was a few workshops, and we also have on the wall here an interactive map with a QR code so that people can see where their parcel is and what an estimated fee would be, and we plan to use that mechanism in the future for transparency. In developing this fee, we've followed a proven recipe that complies with Proposition 218, and the main steps are to establish revenue needs that are reasonable for the stated need and benefits, and I think we've done that. We've kept the budget as low as we can. We've developed 5-year revenue projections that included GSA admin and SGMA compliance costs fundamentally. We then did a cost allocation analysis and looking at fee options, and that was characterized in the technical memorandum, and here we are with the third step, considering fee approval. So this is the budget that assumed no DWR SGMA funding, because back then we didn't even know if it was going to be realistic. But we developed a budget, a worst case budget, that assumed we are on our own to fully fund all of our needs for the next 5 years. And so this budget has been available since it was approved in March to everyone, and we've provided it to a lot of folks. It's been available on the website all along. So we just want to show you that what we're doing is consistent with the planning we've done on the project. We also included a, what if we do get SGMA funding, 5-year revenue projection proposal, and we started to talk about this at the public workshop. And we're gonna, when we get to the annual budget item, this is something the board will deliberate on, but these are the two revenue projections we included in the fee report, so the board would be in a position to approve the best available fees. This is a snapshot of the preliminary recommended fees in order to develop the maximum fee that was in the Prop 218 notice. So you can see in the 5th year is where the maximum fees would occur under the no DWR funding scenario. And that's what was included in the Prop 218 notice. But as Cammie mentioned, the board can approve any fee from 1 cent all the way up to the maximum based on their judgment. So I'm going to turn it back over so you guys can finish the public hearing.
Okay.
Can we ask questions about the presentation at all?
Yeah, just a second.
Sir?
No, just a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Conley.
Okay, it'd be helpful if everyone.
Chair Conley, can you turn on your microphone?
Okay, it'd be helpful if everybody speaks today, but please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Does the microphone automatically turn off, or do we buzz them, or what do we do? No, each place we go is different?
It'll have a timer.
A timer, okay. And then if you would like to, you don't have to, give your name and address, just so we know who you are, but you're not a law that you have to. And if your comments are similar to other people, try to move on to a different subject. And please be respectful, as I talked about before, to other speakers and to yourself, and to us, please. And with that, we'll call your name, and we'll have, why don't you call them for me? That's easier. Frankly, I'm nervous. I'm telling you, I've been doing this 18 years. It's the first time I've had to impose any type of fee, so I'm going to delegate that to you, and we'll start, and when you come up to the podium, you're more than welcome to ask your questions.
Okay, we'll start with the speaker cards and then open it up to the public that haven't submitted speaker cards. We'll start with Steve Jackson, followed by Christine.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So whenever my government decides, Steve Jackson, I'm a Butte County resident, Butte County employee. I live on Trace Vias Road. Whenever my government decides to reach into my wallet, I get concerned. This fee is a tax, in my opinion. It's not unlike the state responsibility area fee imposed by CAL FIRE a few years ago, where the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association took them to task and said, enough. You're not just going to reach into homeowners' wallets and take their money. Gavin Newsom spent over $2 billion, misspent $2 billion during COVID, giving that money to inmates as unemployment benefits. Where is the state of California? Why are they not picking up the tab for this fee? Typically, I would be in favor of local management. Local management is usually best. I also feel like it's my responsibility to point out to my fellow citizens that our county has not been responsible. We've had huge surface water and groundwater pollution issues as a result of our Neal Road landfill over the last 4 years, where we've had at least 24 million gallons of stormwater pollution. The Neal Road landfill is a county-owned and operated business. It's operated as an enterprise fund. It's been managed irresponsibly. It sits in the center of District 4, where I live, and it's polluting our groundwater, and it's polluting our surface water, and it's polluting the air that we breathe. I would normally say, yes, we should manage these issues locally, but in this case, our local government has been an embarrassment when it comes to managing water responsibly. So for that reason, I have to voice my protest against this. I think we're better off to have the state manage it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Christine, followed by Mr. Pat Button.
Good afternoon. Hi.
I am Christine, and I live at 3000 Craig Avenue. Article 13B, Section 6A of the California Constitution basically states that if the state mandates the GSA, in this case, to form a program, then they're mandated. And they were mandated with a three-bill package in 214, which was signed by the governor. And so the truth is, the way I see it, Wyandotte GSA is mandated to exist whether their fees are approved or not. The burden of the funding for the GSA comes from the state because the state states that they will subvent funds to reimburse that local government for the cost of the program or increased level of service. So another question I had was the budget, because I have 3 minutes. The budget that I found was 28% higher. The fees that they were going to get from the budget was 28% higher than their budget. So in terms of dollars, that was $88,639. I'm not quite sure if that definition goes into Prop 26, or does that kick it out at Prop 26 because of unreasonable fees? And then it become a tax and then we vote on it? I'm not quite sure. And then just to be fair, as people of the state of California, we declare sovereignty, and it is, California recognizes that in Code Section 11120, Code Section 54950, and it's the first line in the Brown Act. So me and my husband here, who own this piece of property, I don't know that we can legally approve or disapprove your fees because we're declaring sovereignty. So that's where we are with that. So I don't know about how you guys deal with Proposition 26 and the excessive fees.
I'll get you an answer.
Thank you.
Who's going to address their questions?
I think when it comes to the specific calculations of the budget, Jacques, we had talked about, I think this had come up before. I don't know where he is. Yeah. So
Would you explain the discrepancy
yes.
between the proposed budget and the fees that might be collected?
So when, this is, here we go.
Oh,
It's a red light, yeah.
there you go.
All right.
You're hot.
The fees. So because we selected the irrigated, non-irrigated fee, it includes the fee itself to cover the costs, and then there's additional implementation costs. So we had already separated those out for transparency so the public could see that there's, by approving that fee, if that were to happen, there would be implementation costs on top of it. So the final budget is what you have tonight, which includes the fee plus the implementation cost. And I think that was a misunderstanding at the public workshop. And when you get to the fee approval item, I've actually included the fee revenue table based on the data, so you'll have that right in front of you.
So explain what implementation means.
It means having a policy in place so that we can make sure everyone's equitably charged under the 3-user class irrigated, non-irrigated fee structure. Okay?
Okay.
Hello, my name is Patrick Button,
Good afternoon.
and I'd just like to make an observation that the state of California, by any other name, is still the state of California. Now, if they were to follow what you guys are trying to implement on their own, they'd have to follow Proposition 13. They'd have to have a legitimate ballot. Now, you guys can hide behind, or excuse me, use Prop 218, where you have the option of an honest ballot and a protest ballot. And for you that don't understand what a protest ballot, if you're a non-voter, you're voting for it. So imagine if you guys were able to go a little bit further and say, hey, I got elected by nobody voting for me. Okay, I mean, this is just a sad, sad way of implementing democracy. And this is how you're getting away with it. The poor folks, last Sunday, we had a ceremony in the Durham Park, and they had tearing up a unofficial ballot, and I didn't have the heart to tell them, hey, that doesn't really doesn't matter. It was a shame that they had to go through all that and print all these unofficial ballots just for, you know. So anyway, that's the way you guys are doing it. You had a choice to have a regular traditional ballot, up or down, yes or no. You could have done that, and I'm curious why you didn't. Maybe you're looking forward to someday that you can get elected that way. I don't know, but I'm
don't think so.
really unhappy with it. So that's the end of it. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Mr. Fred Martin, followed by Laura Lynn Lambert.
Good afternoon, Fred.
Good afternoon. I'm a farmer in South Butte County. I appreciate the board giving me the opportunity. I mainly want to address the fee that you're going to be looking at bringing in, and whether it's a fee or a tax. I know I talked with your attorney. I know you're relying upon Prop 218 and Prop 286. There's other things, California Water Code 730, California Government Code 53723, 0077. I read the requirements under both Prop 218 and under Prop 26 that give you the exceptions, and where I think you failed to meet those exceptions. Let me just get to those points. And while I'm getting to them, I do want to say I do realize that the Wyandotte groundwater sustainability is something that we need, and we need to implement something. I'm thinking that the fee structure that we have and where we are going about it may not be the appropriate way. Under Prop 76, it talks about which does not exceed the reasonable cost. Local government bears the burden of proving by a preponderance of evidence that a levy or charge, other exaction is not a tax, that the amount is no more than necessary to cover reasonable costs of the government activity, and that the manner in which those costs are allocated to a payer bear a fair or reasonable relationship to the payer's burdens or benefits received. Your consultant did a fantastic job of putting together the budget, putting together the fee structure that you voted on back in May with the 3 classes. That I think it meets the evidence necessary for reasonable cost of putting that together. My point of contention is with the applicability. One, under California Water Code 10730, I don't see that it gives you the authority to charge groundwater fees or fees to non-irrigated lands or to surface water lands. It's not in that code, that's a groundwater act. That's number one. The way the fees are allocated with groundwater, surface water, and non-use, if I had a 1,000-acre parcel, I don't, and if I had 500 irrigated groundwater, 250 surface water, and I had 250 that I was dry land farming, my research, and I could be wrong, board, so forgive me, but it seems like if I had over 50% of groundwater usage, my whole parcel is charged groundwater. That is not a fair allocation, and I think fails the Prop 26 requirement exemption of not being fairly allocated. I know there's going to be fees. I know they're going to be there. Mine is saying the way you're going about it doesn't appear to meet the exemptions you try to use of either Prop 26 or Prop 218, which also talks about that fair allocation. And that's the only point I wanted to make up. I know that I appreciate all the hard work everybody here has done to put into it. I know we're going to have to implement something. I don't think the protest is going to succeed, but if it did, I don't think we'd be going to the state. I think we're smart enough in this room and with the people that you would regroup and meet and figure out how to keep it local. But those are my basic points. And on the budget, I'm so glad that you mentioned, because I did pull up your budget with the grant money. I got that. It is online. The only thing that question I was going to ask your gentleman that presented, there was a fee schedule based upon no grant funding, but there was no fee schedule based upon receiving grant. I got a budget based on receiving grant funding, but I have no fee schedule. That's something that's available, and will that be discussed later in this meeting that I can participate in?
Yes.
And thank you for your time.
But I just want to point out, it's not our intention if you have 3 types of land to override you. We're trying to set up a protest where you could point that out. Because I believe that's patently unfair. I think we'll try to fix that. Because there's many people that have 2 or more different types of farming or whatever. Thank you.
So I appreciate you looking at that.
And I thank you for being so kind. Thank you.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
For the audience. This gentleman had made a statement in regards to not having access to the no DWR grants and the one that includes DWR grants. Do we not have access to these two?
I don't think we've printed them today, but they have been, they are posted on
They are
the
posted.
website as part of the fee report.
Yeah.
And so, and I think they are part of the presentation later on.
And it'll be our debate later.
Yes.
Janet, I do have the proposed budget for grant money, but I said there wasn't a fee schedule based upon this budget. That's what I didn't see in any of the paperwork or documentation on
Thank
the
you.
website, a fee schedule based upon receiving grant funding.
We'll be debating that later.
Yes.
You're welcome to take part now.
Chair, our last speaker card that we have is Laura Lynn Lambert. And you'll,
Oh.
yeah. Hi.
Good afternoon.
I guess this is on. I'm Laura Lynn Lambert. I'm a realtor, and I'm also an artist. My concern is I sell a lot of property in the basin, you know, time and so I received this week a notice from our natural hazards disclosure company, who right now they're implementing the reports of the basins throughout California now in their report, which is a third-party report we give to the buyers and the sellers so they know what their natural hazards are. And I called the gal and I said, really? Well, we haven't really implemented ours yet. And she said, well, yours isn't in there yet. We're just letting you know that it's going to be coming, and we're having the most trouble with the counties and the basins that do not have local control. It's because the fees and the costs are so much higher, and I want people to really research that, because it will impact your buying and selling and the cost of your property transfers. And it's something that is really important to pay attention to and know that the local management is so much better for all of us.
Thank you.
I want to speak.
Yes, ma'am.
Out where I live in Palermo, I have neighbors that own big parcels of land, and none of them received any notification about any of this. So I'm the one that had to go ahead and inform them about what was going on. And so I wonder how many other people haven't been informed, and I had to ask KHSL News about 4 times to please try to inform the public about this, and I don't understand why your agency didn't immediately go to KHSL News and inform the public. You want $250,000 a year, but yet I don't see you doing your job informing the public very well. I also think that these fees are very exorbitant, and we as landowners in Butte County should be able to have the right to vote on this tax. So what you are doing right now is very corrupt, it's evil, and it's wrong. And I don't think that people even understand the people who are getting irrigated surface water, who pay for their water already from a water company, they don't understand that they're going to pay almost $9 per acre. Okay, so if you have 5 acres, they're going to pay $44.90. 10 acres, $89.80. 20 acres, $179.60. 100 acres, $898. 500 acres, then we're getting up to big money, 4,490 acres. If you own 1,000 acres, you're going to pay $8,980. That's a lot of money. Where do you think people get this money? Everything in the store is going up sky high. What about disabled veterans? What about low-income seniors? What about disabled people who who want a fixed income? You're not taking anybody into consideration. This is wrong. Also, your meetings shouldn't be held at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when people are working. Your meeting should be open to the public when they are able to come in here and voice their opinion, hear the information, and be here. When people aren't going to take off work to come over here. Okay, so if you're getting groundwater, your well water usage, if you have 10 acres, you're going to pay $138. 20 acres, $276. 100 acres, $1,380. That's a lot of money. 500 acres, $6,900. 1,000 acres, $13,800. How do you think people are going to pay for this? You are wrong. You haven't informed the public at all. You've made no exemptions for veterans, disabled people, low-income people, senior citizens. I don't know what world you're living in, but this whole thing is evil, corrupt, underhanded, and that's about all I have to say.
I'm not going to comment. Any other cards or anybody else like to see?
Does anybody have a comment up there?
Oh.
You're going to get paid $250,000 a year comment on what I got to say.
Well, you're pretty incorrect in what you
No, I'm
said.
not incorrect.
Okay,
Very
then
incorrect.
I'm not going to,
As a supervisor, I will not vote for you again.
thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? I'm going to close the public hearing, and we're going to move on. I declare this public hearing closed. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank the landowners attending for their willingness to take part and take time from their day to participate in the hearing. Thank you for being here. At this time, I direct the agency's consultant to tabulate the written protests that have been submitted, to announce the number of valid protests that were submitted, and to advise that the protests were sufficient to comprise a majority protest of the proposed new fee. A protest is valid if 50% plus one of all parcels in the agency paying the fee protest against the fee. Now we have to pause. So we're on break.
Yes.
How long do you think it'll take us?
They didn't get to know, most people didn't even know that the protest needed to be done, since it's groundwater. not
How long did it take
surface.
last night about? And I'd say about a half an hour to 45 minutes, depending on the number of ballots. I'll go check real quick.
45 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be back in 45 minutes.
We're welcome to stay here.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, you can come up and talk to me if you want.
I did a lot of research.
I would imagine. I would imagine.
Okay, good news, it's only going to take about 15 minutes. Very valid because 500 acres of pasture. And if we keep getting grants, we'll be If I'm 70 years old,
Then I got you. We've been to a lot of different. This is just one more thing. For me, scholars a year more. This testing. I've done groundwater. A lot of natural gas buildings and ones that do the beavers.
Yeah. They're up in the houses too. Yeah.
We've even brought the government trappers. I did that.
That's scary.
2 years ago, he's got a ranch in Idaho. Mile and a half on it. But I just think that
It took me 5 years. Down, so I had to get rid of it. My house, I lived at where the old Rainbow Bread was. Second unit in, that's my home. Because I'm divorced.
let me stick around, but
I wish I was as educated as you are.
I did a lot of research.
Do you
Isn't Tehama's GSP tied up with a lawsuit?
raising land, I think a higher raising land. I can't see some guy with 2 or 3,000 acres paying $5 an acre and he has one well. No, but that's they try to. So you're not gonna piss somebody off no matter what you just. But you are, and we.
I've done a lot of research into that.
Benefit too, because our grandchildren will have groundwater. Because there is this overarching reach by the state that they keep water. So I'm not ever fooled that they're not hoping we have a surplus of water so they can come get more of it. I'm never fooled by that. But I just know that you gotta be reasonable.
Israel, Saudi Arabia, Spain. Okay, you might not like this. Point source.
Correction is saying this is a state mandate without funding. But we've had lawyers look at it and they are smart enough that they back themselves with enough rules and regulations. They can mandate stuff. That's the truth. And the threat is we'll make it worse if you don't do it. And we deal with it at the county on a regular basis. You pay your property tax, you get $15,000 general fund.
I might be a dumb farmer. You're still looking for an alternate for Kyle. But Lord willing, I won't be here next year.
South needs It is.
$1 billion in Butte County. In Butte County alone.
Pricing, yeah. A lot of people put walnuts in Chinese. Walnuts, they do it with apples. They live in some of the best times.
He wants to have, even if we had all these trucks.
Well, some of it we got from the dam, and we're Or Bangor Roads. All the way to Bangor. Worst meeting I've ever had to chair because I hate it. Leading is doing the hard thing. You don't want to. But this is how it's going to get built on the raising taxes. How do you explain it? Yeah, but how do you explain it? I mean, I hate it because, yeah.
Yesterday, it took me 10. Well, it should have been 9. And the construction of. There was a delay on even just that road construction.
20's kind of nice. Oh my God. No.
So you remember all those reversing?
Oh, yeah. But I used to go there all the time, but I haven't been there in 5 years. And I was thinking everyone towards me, and I haven't been there but once.
We have no choice. Either the citizens
Even
of
36
Wyandotte
is
Creek
definitely
Agency
Red Bluff.
or area
Through Mad River and all. Where'd you see? That was right way there.
take over, and which they are.
I thought the aliens were here.
Water is an issue.
they're not in the district.
If you said it's that, I'm not gonna argue. If you said it's
Hello, everyone. Okay. Please get your attention. Get your attention. Thank you. Okay, the consultant, wait. The consultant has tabulated all the valid protests and has determined that 108 eligible written protests were filed. A total of 5,979 protests must be filed to constitute a valid protest. Because the number of protests is less than the 5,979 required, the protest fails. And it broke down this way. The Wyandotte Creek GSA PO Box received 84. The Wyandotte Creek GSA office received 9. Wyandotte Creek GSA public hearing received 15. So the total protests counted were 108. So it obviously fails.
108 protest votes.
All right, so we're going to go on to our regular business at this time. Consideration of resolution certifying Wyandotte Creek majority protest process and approving fee and basis for setting the operations fee. Staff, Butte County.
All right, thank you, Chair Connolly. So this next step is the resolution that certifying this process, and all of these resolutions are required as part of the 218 process, as well as what needs to be submitted to the auditor's office as part of the tax roll. So. So just as a reminder that we started this process for the long-term fee with the approval of the fee report at the May 25th board meeting, including the recommended long-term fees, the approval of the Proposition 218 notice for distribution to landowners within the Wyandotte Creek GSA service area and those that are subject to the fees. We have now had the public hearing to receive protests prior to consideration of the fee, and the notice of the public hearing was published in the Chico Enterprise Record newspaper, a newspaper of large circulation, which is the only one really that we have here prior to the public hearing. So the next part of this process is approving this resolution, which is in your handout.
Okay, so up for consideration is the resolution certifying this protest process. Do we open public comment on each and everything?
Just like every, yeah.
If anyone from the public would like to speak, you're more than welcome to speak for 3 minutes.
On June 22nd, and after the meeting, I commented that, okay, with this money that you're going to take to increase surface water, okay, are there any dams or reservoirs in the plans? They said no. So how are you going to increase surface water? Are you going to hire some Indians to do some rain dances? Are you going to pay God to rain more? What are you going to do? This is just stealing our money. I can't see, if you have no plans that's what's going to increase surface water, is more dams and reservoirs. What are you going to do without that? Is just take our tax money.
Well,
thank you.
I don't know how to address that, because we're going to make sure that we have groundwater for future generations and it's safe and clean.
All it's going to do is make our children pay more money.
Okay, you had your 3 minutes, ma'am. Come on up, Steve. Good afternoon again.
Yeah, good afternoon. Hey, I just want to provide a quick comment. I strongly feel like the constitutionality of this has not been tested. In the research that I did, the limited research that I did, that's what I found. And so I would encourage any citizens that feel strongly about this, that we reach out to the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, or that we perhaps form our own class action and pursue to test the constitutionality of this through the courts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak before we move to approval? I'm going to close public comment on this item. All right, somebody make a motion to certify.
Motion, we approve the resolution certifying the Wyandotte Creek GSA majority protest process.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next up, number 5, consideration of resolution to adopt the Wyandotte Creek GSA 23-24 annual operations budget.
All right, thank you, Chair Connolly. So the next item, and I don't know if it's actually in the proposal, but or the presentation, the next item is a discussion of the annual budget for the agency. One of the things that I just, as Christina's pulling it up, I just wanted to remind everyone that what we did was identify a 5-year budget for the funding mechanism, and for the 2023 fiscal year and on for the next 5 years. And as part of that budget, we have revenues that we've identified, as well as the expenses for running the GSA. And I know people have asked this in other meetings. So the cost of running the GSA up until this point has been primarily through in-kind staff services of the 3 member agencies that make up the GSA, including Butte County, the City of Oroville, and Thermalito Water and Sewer District. The GSP, or the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, that was prepared was funded through grant funding. And so up until this point, it's either been grant funds to fund the GSP, the plan preparation, and in-kind staff services from the member agencies, as well as some one-time funding that the county put forward. The Board of Supervisors gave to the County Department of Water and Resource Conservation to do some activities, such as the grant application, this funding mechanism to hire the consultant, and the annual report, which is a SGMA compliance activity. So we've been directed, staff has been directed by the board to make this agency a financially viable and self-sustaining agency, and that is why we are doing this fee. So when you look at the expenses on the budget, it includes the things that an agency, a public agency, is required to have, which is annual audits, legal services, and we have also looked at hiring a program manager for the GSA that would be housed in the Butte County Department of Water and Resource Conservation. The cost of this program manager would be shared by this GSA as well as the Vina Subbasin GSA. So that way there would be a dedicated staff person to help run the GSAs. And then there's also just basic office expenses such as insurance and bank fees, website, et cetera. And then one thing I'd like to point out, unlike the Vina Subbasin, we don't have a legal defense fund. We have legal services that Andrew has been providing us, but this GSA is lucky it has not been litigated yet. The Vina GSA and the Vina Subbasin and the Butte Subbasin are both have lawsuits against within them. So the other items on this budget are the SGMA compliance items, and these are also items that were included in the grant application that we'll talk about in a little bit. But the SGMA compliance items are the things that are required by SGMA to complete, especially the annual reports will be required to complete a plan update every 5 years. The plan needs to address some surface water modeling, surface water interaction. So there are data gaps that are identified in the plan, and in order to maintain compliance with SGMA, these are the things that need to be funded. So before we apply Sigma grants, these are things that what this fee is also takes into account. So with that, we have the budget, the recommended budget for the 2023 fiscal year, just up here so that you can see it, as well as the five-year budget. So I didn't know if you had questions regarding that, but
Questions or comments on the budget by the board?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Cameron, regarding the shared program manager fees with Vina, what last night when they approved their budget, did they allocate the same amount?
so last night when Vina approved their budget, they allocated, they're banking on using a portion of DWR grants for that position. The position shifts a little bit for the program manager of the time that let me go back. We decided that it would be about a 70-30 split of time, where the program manager would spend 70% of their time on Vina GSA activities and 30% of their time on Wyandotte Creek activities.
We have such nicer people.
Yes, we have nicer people in Wyandotte Creek. And so that's how the budget would be split between the agencies. Last night, Vina approved their fee, and they did allocate money for the program manager. It's a different amount because they're covering 70% of the cost.
May I ask what that amount is?
The total amount that they will be contributing is about $110. Last night in their fee structure,
$10?
$110,000.
Oh.
Sorry, I had to add a few zeros. Their fee structure is a little different. They will be contributing $60,000 from their fee, and then some funds from the grant administration, assuming they get the grant, and because they are still in draft awards. That changes what the program manager will be focusing on for the Vina GSA, meaning they their 70% of the time, their time, a lot of it will be focused on implementing grants, because we cannot use grant administration for GSA operations. So it changes what they will be focusing on a little bit in the Vina GSA. For one of the things that the program manager would be focusing on is a lot of the policy items that the GSAs need to implement. And so Vina will likely be putting a little bit of that off, but since they did fund some of that, it is yet to be determined which specific policies and programs. This board later we'll be talking about the fee policy and appeal process, and so that is something that the program manager will also be working on to help develop, assuming we get someone in time. Otherwise, it's staff at this point. But does that answer your question a little bit?
Thank
And
you.
so we will be bringing an agreement to this board, the Vina GSA board, as well as the Board of Supervisors, since that person will be housed in our department, and they will clarify the roles and responsibilities, the division of time, and what they'll be focusing on.
So they allocated 110,000
Mm-hmm.
total, and 70% of that will be
110,000 is their 70%.
their 70%. So this
Yeah.
program manager will be making 160,000.
It also takes in, the total cost also takes into consideration the benefits and the things that we pay employees of the county. So it's a fully loaded rate. It takes into consideration the PERS, the insurance, and all of
Okay.
the things that an employee of the county receives.
That seems like a lot.
At the base salary, it'll depend. We haven't run the ad. We are currently in the process of developing the description for the program manager, working with Butte County Human Resources for that description. There are different classifications, and we've identified one that we think is appropriate for the program manager.
Okay.
And there is also a different tiered system for the salary. So we haven't specifically identified that yet.
Okay, any more questions? This is on the,
I've got a comment.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, in speaking with some members of the audience,
this whole process is like a runaway train from my perspective, and we're all caught up in it. And we're way past being able to do anything to slow it down. Could one of our consultants explain the genesis of this, when this was first imposed by the state of California, with what year it was and what was a mechanism that this was imposed on the whole state, us included?
Sure.
Somebody give us a brief
overview of the
synopsis of that,
Sustainable
yeah.
Groundwater Management Act.
How it came into being and how we got caught up in this.
Do you want to provide more of that background?
Sure, I would say, so the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was passed by the state legislature in, I believe, September of 2014. And if we'll remember, we were in the middle of a very severe drought. 2013, 14, and 15 were extremely dry years. And during that time, especially the San Joaquin and Tulare basins, so southern Central Valley, were experiencing a lot of significant drought impacts, and things were kind of out of control. And so out of that, that was kind of the cherry on top, I think, that got the state legislature and really the public in many places too to this point of saying we have to manage groundwater in this state. About 100 years prior is when surface water was kind of managed at the state level through permits and through the State Water Resources Control Board. So 100 years later, we find ourselves with state legislation for groundwater management. And that's what the state law is, but it really does have this embedded in it, this local control piece, recognizing that groundwater basins are complicated geologically, politically, socially, economically, and that groundwater really should be managed with all of that in view, and that's best done at the local level. So the first thing that the law does is it created groundwater sustainability agencies, and that's what Wyandotte Creek GSA is, a groundwater sustainability agency that has the authority and the responsibility to manage groundwater as described in that legislation. And then the second step was to develop and adopt a groundwater sustainability plan, and that's what we've done here and submitted that in 2022, so about a year and a half ago. And that was submitted to the state. The State Department of Water Resources has the responsibility of reviewing and determining whether those plans comply with the regulations and the law. And that's what we just heard today, that the Wyandotte Creek GSP has been approved by the state. So now we are embarking on this kind of second phase of implementing the plan and managing groundwater. And like we've talked about here, in the Wyandotte Creek subbasin, we really have the luxury of maintaining sustainable groundwater conditions, and so that is really helpful for keeping costs low. We do have some data gaps, so some areas that we need to monitor and have better information. And then we do have opportunities too to get at one of the earlier questions, not to be able to make it rain, of course, but there are agencies in this subbasin at times that have extra surface water, or that have surface water that could be used in other parts of the subbasin. So one of the projects in the plan is to look at how do we expand the use of available surface water for irrigation in the subbasin and therefore become less dependent on groundwater. That's one of the best ways to maintain sustainable groundwater conditions. So I'll leave it there, but let me know if you want me to follow up on anything.
No, so it's really a comprehensive plan, and it's local, and we're all volunteers up here. And anybody can volunteer and serve on the board. We're just trying to manage what's been imposed by the state. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, before us is a consideration of resolution to adopt the annual operations budget. Anybody from the public like to speak? Come on up.
I guess I got a question for this project manager. Is he going to be a county employee, or she?
Yes.
Okay, so it's going to be a county employee. So I would recommend, since we got a 70-30 split with Wyandotte sharing 30% and Vina sharing 70, and they got a budget, but they're counting on grant money they haven't received, that we don't hire anybody till we get all the funding in place. Because if you hire somebody and we're the only ones that fund it, guess who's going to get stuck paying the bill? So just as you consider that when you're making your decision, is that part of the budget? I understand the benefits of having that project manager. The other thing, this budget as proposed, are we talking about the one that the first year is somewhere around 224, 240,000 for the first fiscal year, 23, 24? I didn't have the latest information, but I did put together a spreadsheet based upon, and I got a copy, I'll just hand one to you, Bill. Based upon the fees for the 3 subclasses and the amount of acreage that came from your report that's in each subclass. And you'll notice that there's a surplus each year, starting at about 20,000 the first fiscal year and ending with about 54,000 in the other one. And so I'd like you to discuss why that is there. And that was based on the fees compared to the budget. I took your budget, took how much we're going to be collecting with the fees, just a simple Excel spreadsheet that I gave to Mr. Bell. And so I was kind of wondering about that before you approved the budget. Because again, meeting Prop 26 and all those others, we should not be making money. I could see it being a slight difference, but 20 to 54,000 is noteworthy out of a $225,000 budget.
So I will note, and to address that, later in our, as we go through each of the items on the agenda, we will be talking about the maximum fee that you would be adopting, and then what you might want to charge for the 23-24 fiscal year. And in that presentation, it does show the breakdown of the irrigated, non-irrigated acreage, the irrigated surface water and the irrigated groundwater. And I haven't looked at the table that was just provided, but it does show how for this fiscal year, how the number of acres for each of those user classes, the fee that would be charged, and the revenues generated that equal the first year at 246,188. So,
Well, I handed it off to our consultant, but it's worthy of answering because it's conflicting.
Jacques, I don't know if you want to
And
add to that.
I know one thing, we're not trying to make money.
Yeah.
So, trust me.
Right.
No, that's right. Yeah. So is there an explanation for the discrepancy?
Do you
No,
push
you
the
press
button on the
there.
bottom? Right there. Oh, no, you turned it off. There.
You have the real deal. That's why on your annual budget, there's a surplus deficit line item. The revenues collected are very equivalent to the total budget. So there's no excessive revenue being collected. So if you look at the annual budgets we handed to you for DWR funding and no DWR funding, you'll see in both scenarios, we're just going to collect the revenues needed for that annual budget. Do we need to say any more, Cammie? I think that
But how does
explains
his
it.
numbers come out different?
I don't think he's using the same data we are as far as the total budget numbers. But we'll show you that when you get to the fees. We'll show you the exact table, and if we need to, we can show it to you now.
Yeah, why don't you show it to us now?
I think
Because let's
that's
just-
what this is, right? Yeah.
This-
Is that what this is?
Yeah.
Let's clear it up and then we'll move on.
I'm gonna share my screen for folks online.
So just to clarify, for this annual budget item, you have two choices: the no DWR grant and the DWR grant, and that corresponds with two fee choices. So we'll just show you on the next item for approving fees, you have the no DWR grant scenario, and it shows what the fees would be per acre per year and what the revenues collected for each user class are. And it comes into $246,000 and change, which matches up with your annual budget of $246,000 and change for the no DWR grant. And the same thing is
What's
true.
the difference? I'm going to ask the gentleman.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I can see, it sounds like the information with the budget you gave the board today is different than you have posted on your website. I went through everything last night and this morning that I could find on the website. Difference in fees, I was using $1.16, which came from your May meeting for the non-irrigated. 739, you're at 743, I was using 1140. So again, I don't know the math, if it makes up for the 20,000 for the, it may. Your budget's a little higher than the previous budget that I had from your website was 224, 275 from the May 22nd.
So can we have offline conversations?
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're not trying to get over on
I just
anybody.
wanted to bring it up,
All
I
right.
haven't had that information he's presenting.
Okay, we're good then.
We are.
I think we're good. All right,
Yep.
so Any more questions from the audience on the consideration to adopt the Wyandotte Creek annual operations budget?
I just had a quick question.
Can you come to the podium, please, sir? And if you want to, give us your name. If you don't, that's fine.
Josh. My question is about, you have non-irrigated fee, irrigation surface water, and irrigated groundwater. So the irrigated surface water, is that South Feather? Is that what you're considering? Like, if we're buying water from South Feather, which we already do, and pay for that water, are we also going to get charged the $7.43 an acre after we pay?
Are you a farmer irrigating?
I irrigate just to keep the grass green, honestly.
Oh, well, it won't be much of a charge. Go ahead.
So if I heard the question correctly, so you have South Feather Water and Power Water, surface water?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So this fee is separate from South Feather Water and Power. So you would be charged, if your land is classified as the surface water item or classification, then you would be charged that $7.43 per acre per year.
But I don't irrigate all 10. I have 10-acre parcel.
Yeah, using the word irrigated, it just means that it falls within the surface water classification. And so when we say non-irrigated, we're kind of referring to the grazing land, open space land, and unused land. And then surface water users are typically within the Thermalito Water and Sewer District, Cal Water, or South Feather Water and Power. And then the groundwater users are those that are rely on domestic or agricultural groundwater wells. If you are using, let's say, groundwater and are located within the jurisdiction of Thermalito, Cal Water, or South Feather, you would still have the South Feather water classification.
Okay, but I'm
Or surface
unclear of
water
what you're saying.
classification.
So not only am I going to pay South Feather, but I'm going to pay this as well.
Yes, yes.
You don't see a problem with that?
Well,
I'm already paying for it.
No, we're not paying for water. You're paying for the GSA operation to secure water for future.
So if I decide not to buy water from South Feather, I won't pay that $7.43. Is that what you're saying?
No,
No, it's separate from South Feather Water and Power.
nothing to do with them.
It's a different service. So the GSA provides groundwater management service and Sigma compliance. And so the GSA is the Groundwater Sustainability Agency is separate from South Feather. So this will be a separate fee from South Feather Water and Power.
You're not answering. I guess you're not.
May I ask a question? Yeah.
No, the fee
Cammie,
does not go down.
Is there
Go
a
ahead.
difference between irrigation for commercial purposes and irrigation for residential landscaping?
No, the
contention.
the fee is what is applied per acre. So if it's not a water extraction or a water use fee, it's a fee for groundwater management. And yeah, so if you're not using, if you're not using any of the surface water or groundwater, but you're within, or the surface water and you're within South Feather Water and Power Agency, and that is your user class, that is the fee that you pay.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions about the budget?
Maybe even earlier, you can't see.
All right.
Sorry, I have a question. Who will have input in the hiring process for the program manager?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Regarding the program management position, it will be a county employee, but will the agency have input in the
Yes.
hiring process?
Yes, we would probably anticipate one or two of the board members participating in that process. We haven't outlined who or what, but that'll also be part of the agreement. But we do anticipate that each agency will have someone as part of that interview process. Chair Connolly, before
I close, let me get through one more item, okay? I just closed public.
Chair Connolly, can I also bring up, so we have, and maybe this is where the discussion should be had prior to us adopting the fees, right? So we've talked about, there's the maximum fee that you could adopt, and then you could, for the agency, and then each year annually, it could, what is put on the assessor's roll could be that amount or less. If you want to consider at this time adopting a budget that takes into consideration the Sigma grant awards, then you could do that as well, which the assumption would be.
I think that's crazy.
Okay.
I think that's just stupid. I mean, to me, we just adopt the budget, what we have to impose, and if we can impose less, we certainly will.
Okay.
Why come back and face it again? I mean, let's be open to the public. I mean, yeah. Okay, right before us, consideration resolution to adopt the annual budget. I entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the annual budget.
Second.
Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next up, number 6, consideration of resolution to establish a collective fee for Wyandotte Creek GSA operations. Now we're going to get into it.
Okay. Yeah, let's move back to the presentation just so we.
So I just want to make sure that I'm clear. I mean, I'm not going to go out to the public and adopt something that's way lower than it potentially could be and then sneak it back in a year later, a year later, a year later. Let's adopt what our max is, and then let's lower it to the best of our ability every year instead of having to go through this again. And,
Okay.
that's the way I would like to do it unless the board objects. All right.
All right, so this next item is the resolution to establish and collect a fee for the Wyandotte Creek GSA operations. Just as a reminder that this is one of the requirements of the Prop 218 and/or auditors' requirements as we submit the tax roll. So that is what is before you. Is allowing us to collect a fee for the GSA operations.
Okay, the public has questions. They can come up and ask them on the resolution to establish and collect a fee for the Wyandotte Creek GSA operations. Yes, sir?
I admit that I probably do not have the latest fee schedule. This is from the May thing. This fee schedule goes out 5 fiscal years. It sounds like what I heard you say, and forgive me if I'm wrong, that you wanted to vote in the maximum rate now and lower it possibly. This has a lower rate which increases based upon inflation per your consultant's projections. I would recommend, if he has one with the current fees, obviously, that you look at the 5-year fee and implement, that schedule as approved, but also look at the grant funding that just got approved, $1.175 million that can be used for it. Your annual budgets are only $250,000 each year for 5 years. I mean, if you use 100% of it in 5 years, we'd be paying nothing. But I know you can't use 100% of it because it's allocated for other things. So I would recommend, since we got that grant funding, that you look at what would be a reasonable fee with that grant funding so the burden is not all on us. Thank you.
Okay, so let me clarify myself. I will definitely, after we establish the fee, lower it the maximum amount available. But I think it would be silly to come in at a lower rate, knowing that eventually we may not get a grant and have to come back and do this again. But definitely, I know we're gonna lower it.
Accepting the maximum fee for fiscal year 27-28 is the fee you're approving. Approve this fee schedule that goes out 5 fiscal years as your approval. That would be the maximum rate per fiscal year. That would be my recommendation to the board. And then you can lower it from that based upon grant funding.
Okay, we're agreeing, I think.
Is the plan, yeah.
Yeah, I think we agree. Anybody else want to come up and talk to me and us? Thank you for being here. And you do look like an artist, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I'm concerned with any hardship that the taxpayers might be. Is there a mechanism that may be implemented to help somebody that might not be able to come up with this fee?
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this? Setting of the fees. I think we can take that item up later when we talk about, we'll talk about it later. Close public comment. Entertain a motion.
I make a motion, we consider a resolution to establish and collect fee for the Wyandotte Creek GSA operations.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Consideration of a resolution certifying the validity of the legal process used to place direct assessments, special assessments on the secured tax roll to establish those approved by the Wyandotte Creek Board for fiscal year 23-24 on the August 10th, 23 county tax roll. Anybody like to speak on that? It's just a formality at this point. I'm going to close public comment on that. Bring it to the board.
I move
Yeah.
that we adopt the resolution.
A second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next up, consideration of framework for fee review and appeal process. And I think this is where we might be able to discuss that hardship, if there's a possibility for a hardship. We need to listen to a presentation on it first here.
So what you have before you is I'll say a draft policy, but more of a framework for the appeal process or the process of disputing your user classification in the appeal process. And so ultimately, what we would do is define the user classes, the non-irrigated, the irrigated surface water, the irrigated groundwater, and any other definitions. There are some draft definitions in the document that you have before you. And then from there, we would talk about the boundaries and the user class delineations, and then and go into what if there is a change request and identify the basis for a change request. Let's say someone is a non-irrigated user and they're being charged as a groundwater user, and that's when they would come in, they would identify where their parcel is, make their case, and then we would set up a framework for how we review that, whether it's staff, and then we look into it and respond back, or if it's brought to the board, how we do that. If there's a committee that looks at these, and how often we look at it, and then make any changes on the next assessor's role. We could talk about if there is a credit policy. I wouldn't recommend doing a refund, but I'm not legal counsel, so he can chime in on that. But so what we would do is identify that process for the people, the landowners within the basin. If then, once we have that developed, if they don't like what we've identified, then they can have an appeal process to bring it before the board. So this is just the overall framework. There's work to be done here, and we're just wanting to get some direction from the board. We're anticipating that we could do this process through with the Wyandotte Advisory Committee, so it can be public, get input from landowners in that process, and then and bring it back to this board for adoption at a future meeting prior to the tax bills going out.
Well, I'd really like to see a way that somebody that's irrigating part of their land and dry landing part of it can ask for an exemption. I mean, that's reasonable. I don't know what percentage you'd put on that, and I also like some discussion about people in a hardship situation. I mean, if they can't pay their bills or whatever, then we're going to impose this on them. I mean, I know that probably clouds it up a little bit. And I also think this does need to have more public input, and we should not act on it, in my opinion, today. I think we need to have wiser people than me look at it. And then I know legal's going to go, oh, you're clouding the water a little bit. But, yeah, I think we should give everybody an opportunity to protest, especially if they're put in the wrong designation or, again, farming partially dry land and partially irrigated. Anybody else have anything to say about
Is there
that?
precedent for an appeal process like this in terms of
Can we look at others?
multiple or parcels that have both classifications within it?
Yes, I have actually seen appeals processes where what they've done is, let's say if it's 100 acres of land, where they say if less than 25% is irrigated, they would modify the fee for that percent. If it's more than, if there's 75% that's irrigated, then it would be applied to the whole parcel. There's different things like that, and there could be thresholds.
Something reasonable? What about hardship?
I did want to speak to that, and I don't recall the young lady's name, but I really appreciate you standing up and advocating for those that are underserved, that are on a fixed income, that are veterans and disabled. And just like we have that eligibility criteria that is a part of the utilities, water system. Yet let's explore how we can mitigate that. And
Any input
So-
down here? Any public input on this? Frequent flyer, come on.
Thank you, Fred Martin, again. A couple thoughts. One, if I heard you explain it correctly, as far as allocating, you talked about wrong allocations, irrigated versus non-irrigated. Again, I'm a farmer. I know that Kyle's very familiar with this. I deal with the farm service agent. My farm has a farm number. It's a registered farm. They know what I'm farming. They know what water I'm using. They know what's irrigated. Coordinate with them. I could have all three of those categories on one parcel. That's what the appeal process should get. It shouldn't be the preponderance of what it is you get charged. It's a simple math thing, just as I put together that spreadsheet to take a parcel and say, this many acres you're gonna get charged for the groundwater, this many you're gonna get charged for the surface, this many so that's what I would recommend. And I would recommend you don't do it in an appeals process. As I said, coordinate with our other government agents set out on the airport road over there, the Farm Services Agency and I'm drawing a blank on the other one.
Or what is it? Resource Conservation
Yeah,
District?
yes, those two, they have all the information on farms. They may not have it on people that are, not official farmers, that you're gonna have to submit to that, and you're gonna have to find some way of verifying that the owner's not saying, I don't irrigate at all, when they actually do. I understand that, but you have the tools to use. Please use those, and don't wait a year to get in there to use those
I
tools.
think we have to have this back next month, don't we? Yeah.
That would be my comment on that, so.
Before?
Thank you.
No, so we wouldn't be able to get it complete prior to it going to the assessor's roll, so it would be really applicable to next year, and that's where we could, if we did want to include some kind of credit policy or something like that, depending.
Right.
So those are things that we can look at, and to Kyle's thought, we'll look at other examples. I have looked at a few, and so, but doing this with the public as well as the advisory committee, and it would be both a, change in designation, change in use policy, as well as an appeals process, so.
So another comment for the people that may need help. I would recommend that the board look into maybe using some of the grant money instead of offsetting the full fees, use some of that grant money to offset people that need help. Because you have the grant money, and it's just a thought. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Kimmelshue, Supervisor Kimmelshue. Oh, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Chair of the board too, right?
Is it on now? Okay.
You're good.
As far as, I heard it talk about hardship cases. I believe since this will be attached to your property tax bill, which you pay twice a year, I know that the treasurer tax collector can set up a payment plan if you can't pay it all at one point in time. That means you would be paying the whole amount, but it'd be paying it over time. So just a thought there.
Thank you. Any other input? Any other business before? Oh, come on, Steve.
Yeah, so I would just add a comment. If you're looking for an easy way to roll out a fee waiver schedule, the California trial courts have a very easy, simple system you could follow. You wouldn't have to do much. You could simply hold a hearing. People provide a basic amount of information, and then you just hold a hearing and see if they're eligible or not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comment on this matter?
No, I was just going to say the same thing. It needs to be a simple process and easy, simple, easy, and it needs to be communicated to everybody. Because I think it's going, I have 60 acres, but I only irrigate 5 acres. And so I just need to be notified of the process and in a simple way.
So, anything else before us, or?
I think that is it. So we have some direction, things to consider in the policy, and we'll reach out to the WAC, the advisory committee, to also help with this process.
And I'd like to thank the public for being here. I can understand your angst at getting a fee. I don't like it. It's the first time in 18 years I've had to do that. I understand that you're angry. I can feel that. But sometimes leadership, you have to do what's right, even when it feels wrong. And I think this is one of those times. And if there is a court challenge to us, so be it. That's your right, and I protect your right to do that. I'd like to thank the volunteers up here for all their time and effort. And I encourage you to be active and come to the meetings as we develop policies or as we strategize how we're going to put more water in the ground and going forward. Thank you so much for being here. Meeting adjourned. I'll talk to you afterwards. There you go. Thank you for being so quiet.